Meanwhile, the crew over at Morning Joe on MSNBC, the same crew that wanted Biden to continue running in this presidential race, despite the fact that he was suffering from clear cognitive decline. Yeah, those people, they're furious that journalists would have the audacity of ever reporting anything negative on the Democratic nominee, Kamala Harris, because Trump he's a special threat. And so since they've decided that Trump is a very special threat, well, then journalists should hide information about Kamala Harris from you, so you don't vote for Trump and definitely vote for Kamala Harris. In other words, they want the media to manipulate you and do the exact opposite of journalism. Don't believe me? Well, why don't we hear co-host Mike Barnicle make his case?
But there's a false equivalency going on in the coverage of this race, in that Donald Trump can say whatever crazy things he wants to say about submarines and sharks and electric batteries, whatever he wants to say. And it's not really covered in the sense that it's covered describing who said it, why he said it, and who the man is, Trump, out of his mind. And always in that story, in the equivalency, the false equivalency by too many reporters and too many American newspapers, there's also, by the way, Kamala Harris changed her mind on fracking. They always throw in something like that in the coverage of the story. It's ridiculous. We don't cover the man for how dangerous he is.
You don't cover the man for how dangerous he is? I don't know. I don't know what country I'm living in, but I feel like we get wall-to-wall coverage about Trump being a danger to this country. It is incessant. It is all they talk about on MSNBC. Did he just suggest that journalists shouldn't report on Kamala Harris changing her mind on fracking? Is that not an important policy that voters should be informed about? And also, is he under the impression that telling Americans the truth about where Kamala Harris stands on the issues automatically means that Donald Trump is gonna win the election? And now we're in this awful era of conditioning audiences and readers to expect journalists to cheerlead like partisan hacks for one candidate or the other. And if you don't do it, if you don't engage in it, they get mad at you. You're supposed to be my cheerleader. You're supposed to cheerlead for my preferred candidate. What are you doing? How dare you talk about Kamala Harris and how she went from being against fracking to now saying she's totally in favor of fracking? How dare you? The media doesn't fearmonger about Trump enough? Has he considered that maybe, just maybe, the media had been fearmongering about Trump so much, so often, that Americans have become desensitized to it? Has he considered that? Has he considered the fact that Joe Biden ran his campaign almost entirely on Donald Trump is a threat to democracy, and it wasn't working? Why do you think it wasn't working? This is the most brain dead argument I have heard on MSNBC, and that is saying something, because there are a lot of brain dead arguments made on MSNBC. But we're about to hear more. So Joe Scarborough argues that journalists who are trying to be objective actually end up helping Trump. So maybe don't be objective. Let's watch.
Even Arlington, you've seen major newspaper outlets talk about, well, how will this impact Kamala Harris and the issue of Afghanistan after he goes? And he
does a thumbs up and pictures.
Well, and just acts like a brute and desecrates Arlington. That's not a time to say, well, how does it, it's, but again, we see it time and time again. For some reason, the mainstream media, what are we, 9 years in to Donald Trump's era in American politics, still doesn't know how to cover Donald Trump. Their objectivity actually is not objective at all. It ends up playing to Donald Trump's advantage.
Don't be objective because it plays to Donald Trump's advantage. Why? Because journalists want to answer a question about how Kamala Harris would handle Afghanistan, what her views on Afghanistan happen to be. Do the American voters have the right to know where Kamala Harris stands on those issues? Or should we be kept in the dark because Trump bad? Trump bad. That's what Joe Scarborough wants. He wants journalists to line up and say in unison over and over again, Trump bad, because that's been real effective, right? Listen, he wants to be a cheerleader for one side. That's great, go be a cheerleader for one side. But don't sit there on your boring ass morning show where you try to gaslight the American public about Biden's mental health and pass judgment on people who are trying to get Kamala Harris to answer questions on something amazing, policy, where she stands on policy. Because there are voters out there, believe it or not, who aren't partisan hacks. Those are the individuals who actually end up deciding elections, and they want to know where Kamala Harris stands on policy. Simply hearing Trump bad over and over again doesn't work for them. I think the American people deserve to know where both candidates stand on policies. Don't insult the intelligence of voters. And more importantly, please don't pressure journalists to suck at their jobs by being nothing more than partisan hacks like Joe Scarborough is, like Mika Brzezinski is. It is unbelievable to me. So look, turns out that some are taking this crappy advice already, as left-wing misinformation, unfortunately, is now part of our media landscape. And it's not something that I'm happy about, because a lot of these sources I used to trust, I used to believe they're reporting at face value. And then I came to the realization that they weren't telling the whole truth. They were admitting parts of the story. They were, in some cases, taking Trump out of context. And it was infuriating, because if you put Trump in context and you actually report the story accurately, I'm not gonna suddenly be a huge Trump fan, but I am gonna get angry when I find out that the sources that I trusted were intentionally taking him out of context to make him seem worse than he really is. So there was a piece out in the New York Times today that I think you should all read. And it was titled, "Left-wing misinformation is having a moment. America's right flank remains the chief purveyor of misinformation, but this summer's political tumult created ideal conditions for falsehoods to spread among progressives." So let's just quickly focus on the Trump assassination attempt, where Joy Reid, an MSNBC host with more than 340,000 followers on Threads, raised questions about Trump's injury from the shooting, doubts that some of her followers interpreted when his medical details were not released as implying a cover-up. Then you also had that Brooklyn Dad Defiant guy on X, who has more than 1.3 million followers. He amplified such suspicions by offering his own doubts about Trump's injury. Yeah, the FBI confirmed that Trump got shot in the ear. Okay, like it's confirmed by the FBI. Like, who are we? Really, we're gonna play this game where we engage in conspiracy theories? Like, on one hand, criticize the right wing for engaging in conspiracy theories as we engage in conspiracy theories? I think it's pretty gross. But as a result, more than 1/3 of President Biden's supporters believe the assassination attempt may have been staged, according to a poll in July by Morning Consult. There's other stuff. And like, I hesitate to even bring this up because people are hell-bent on being scared about Project 2025. But let me just be clear about something. There are all sorts of allegations about the Heritage Foundation's document, which again, they release every election cycle. This is the first time we have the Democratic Party specifically tying it to Donald Trump, because some of the people associated with the Heritage Foundation used to be in Trump's administration. Okay, does that mean that Trump is, you think Trump respects anyone who was in his administration? But okay, let's talk about the specific allegations that we've heard about what's in Project 2025, which is a 900-page document. The media knows that most Americans, they don't have the bandwidth to sit down and read a 900-page document. So they get to say whatever they want about it. They get to claim that it includes all sorts of things that it doesn't even actually say. So for instance, Vice President Harris said on July 23rd that Project 2025 called for cutting Social Security. It was not a one-time mistake. She also said at a July 11th, 2024 campaign event, Project 2025 includes a plan to cut Social Security. Well, NewsGuard, which does a pretty good job in fact checking these types of claims on both sides, took a look and they found out that the Project 2025 policy playbook titled Mandate for Leadership, the Conservative Promise, does not even mention any proposed changes to Social Security. Okay, great. Left-leaning news outlet, thegrio.com, advanced the myth that Project 2025 proposes banning Muslims. The mandate for leadership includes no mention of a Muslim ban or any religion or ethnicity-specific entry ban. I'm not saying this to help Trump. I think Trump is plenty bad on his own, and there are factual attacks that you could use against Donald Trump to win the election. Making things up to scare Americans into voting for the Democratic candidate, all it does is lead to people feeling totally disgusted with politics, because people eventually find out. And people are getting sick of the fear tactics. And what's amazing to me is that the people over there at Morning Joe desperately want journalists to engage in more scare tactics, to lie to audiences more, to lie to readers more, to essentially do political cheerleading for one party over the other. And whether it's done on behalf of the Republican Party or the Democratic Party, I'm sick of it. You need real journalism, factual journalism, actual reporting in order to have a well-functioning democracy. Without it, we are hopeless. And so hopefully journalists don't listen to knuckleheads like Joe Scarborough and that other guy, Barnacle, whatever his name is. I mean, just, we don't like Trump, so we want you to lie on behalf of Kamala Harris or Biden or whoever. I mean, they've been outed as liars. Have they considered that maybe journalists don't want to embarrass themselves the way the crew over at Morning Joe has? They should think about it.